Hi everyone, I'm Julia with the Berkeley Judicial Institute, back with another installment of Judges in the Community. Today, we're joined by Judge Story to share the inspiring civic engagement work he has done in schools across the state of Georgia and beyond. Good morning, Judge Story. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. I can't wait to dive into your journey and insights, but before, just to start out, would you mind briefly sharing a little bit more about who you are, where you sit, and your personal judicial history?
Good morning. I'm happy to do that. I sit on the Federal District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. Our district is headquartered in Atlanta. We have divisions in other cities. I am primarily in the Gainesville division, which is a smaller town than Atlanta, but in Northeast Georgia. But I still have cases in Atlanta and in Gainesville. I'm what's known as a senior judge. I've been at this long enough that I have taken semi-retirement, which means I can reduce my caseload, but yet continue to work and take cases and help in the work of the court. Uh, my career, I'm a graduate of the University of Georgia School of Law and practiced in a small civil firm here in Gainesville before becoming first a juvenile court judge and then a judge in the state court of general jurisdiction. In 1998, I was appointed to the federal court and have served in the U.S. District Court since 1998.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your introduction. It is such an honor to speak with you. And now, kind of diving right into the core of our conversation today, what project are you here to share with us, and where did it all begin?
Well, it's interesting the way it began because it's an unusual beginning. Sometimes in cases where there's a settlement, especially particularly in class action suits, a settlement may be reached in which the members of the class are to be paid certain compensation. And sometimes they are not able to find all the members of the class to pay their money. And so there's money left at the end of the case that was supposed to be paid by the defendant as damages to the plaintiffs, but they can't find some of the plaintiffs. So you have a fund, it's called a cypre fund, and those are funds that someone has to decide what to do with it. The typical thing is that the parties will reach an agreement that the funds are going to be donated to some cause or used for some purpose or perhaps distributed in some other way. This was an interesting case in that the lawyers decided when they reached a settlement in the case that if there were funds left over at the end, they didn't want to fight about what to do with the funds. I guess they were tired of fighting. They had fought enough. And so they said, we will let the judge decide what's done with any money that's left. So at the end of this case that had gone on for several years, and the settlement involved, quite honestly, millions of dollars, but at the end of the day, there was a fair sum of money remaining that had not been distributed. And this was in spite of the fact that they found over 99% of the plaintiffs and got them their money. So there were just a smaller number of folks by, relatively speaking, but that money needed to be spent somewhere. I struggled with what to do. I'd never had a large sum of money at my disposal to decide what to do with it and how to do the most good with it. Often in these kinds of cases, especially when there's a particular injury that has been suffered by all the plaintiffs, some type of physical injury, the funds will be used to help work in that area of health, to help with other folks who may have suffered the injury. My case was not that kind of case. It was a life insurance case. It was how the insurance companies had chosen to pay the benefits under life insurance policies. So there was no clear cause to contribute the funds to that would be consistent with the needs of the people who were a part of this class. So I puzzled for several months over what to do. I wanted it to have an impact and to make a difference. I happened to be attending a judges training program in San Diego, and a law professor was speaking at that conference, and he was from the Maurer School of Law at Indiana University. And he mentioned that they had a program in their school where the law students went to a middle school and taught kids civics, taught them about government, taught them about the courts. a light went on for me. I said, that's what I can do. That's something we can do. So I immediately went to him after he finished speaking, and I said, I need more information. He said, I've got to catch a plane. Here's my email address. Email me. So I emailed him, and he put me in touch. Their program there is completely student run. And the woman who was the president of the organization at that time, her name was Madeline Richmond, and the program was called Outreach for Legal Literacy. I contacted her, and she was so excited about what they were doing and how energized the students were by these programs that I was even more convinced this is what I needed to do. So I reached out to Rebecca Fanning, who works for the administrative office of the courts, and had her assist me. And we talked about what can we do? How can we put together a program? And working together, we put together a program that law students could take into high schools to teach civics and be a part of that. And so we developed that program, and I went to the deans at 3 law schools in Georgia. I went to University of Georgia, Georgia State University, and Mercer University in Macon, and met with the deans, told them about the plan. Each dean was enthusiastic and wanted to be a part of it. And so that's how it all began. We then awarded the funds to them, but left it to them to design their own programs, to look at their communities, decide what would work best for them, and design a program based on that. And so that's how it all got started.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I'm curious how this project kind of evolved over time. Like, has there been any roadblocks or inspirations that kind of drive this project into one direction or the other? Like, if you could tell us more about how the civic education program in these high schools have grown to what it is today.
It's interesting because it's still fairly new. This happened in January of 2023. So the first, I guess the first programs were for the fall of 2023, and now fall of 2024, they're doing it for the second time, having learned from the previous year. Interestingly, 2 of the law schools were able to attach themselves to programs that were in place. At Georgia State, they had a program, it's commonly referred to as a street law program. Georgetown University has such a program, and a lot of schools have modeled after them, where they go into schools and teach kids about their rights and responsibilities under the law. They had such a program at Georgia State, but this funding allowed them to enhance that program. One of the big ways, and one of the things I encouraged them to do, was actually have the students come to the law schools. At the end of the year, to have an event where they came to the law schools and saw what a law school looked like, met law students, even more law students, hopefully excited them about perhaps following a career in the law, and to get that opportunity to see that. And so the funds were able to increase the program at Georgia State. And I had the real pleasure of attending their year-end event last year, where there were over 200 high school students from 5 Atlanta public schools at this program, and they had breakout sessions, and then they had mock trials for groups of students, and I served as the judge in the mock trials. And it was a tremendously exciting day, and to see how fired up the kids were about it and engaged. At Mercer, on the other hand, a teacher there had a kind of a law program within the school that she just taught. This allowed the law students to get involved with it, which has really added a nice dimension, because you think about when you were in high school, you respected your teachers, but they were from a different world than we were. But to have law students closer in age to you, who can be perceived as much more cool perhaps than a high school teacher, but to have them come in and take time with you and to teach you these matters. And it's been exciting. At Mercer, the students not only go and teach, but what has been exciting is they have gotten engaged with the schools, so that the idea was they would go and teach civics. But what has actually happened is they teach civics, but they also have volunteered to work with the school's mock trial program and to be engaged in other aspects of the school. So they've become citizens of the school, and become a part of it, which just enhances their relationship with the students, and is a benefit that when we started this, I had not anticipated. But the beauty is you think about folks who go to law school, and so many of them go for so many of the right reasons. They want to make this world a better place. They want to improve people's lots and life. And so you put them in a high school setting, and they see needs. They want to deliver. And so it's been a real benefit.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, especially where, these law school students can interact with local high schoolers. That's not a chance that you get on a daily basis. And I think the conversations there are very valuable and ones that hopefully, future lawyers and prosecutors and judges will remember those
Right.
experiences. So no, that's amazing. And so kind of echoing that thought. When you reflect on the experience of the participants themselves, are there any stories or moments in particular that stand out to the impact of this program and making it part of your community?
I want to share. I've anticipated you would be interested in that. I just pulled one of the quotes from one of the students that is at the Georgia State program, and this student made this comment: "Law school is overwhelming, and you sometimes feel removed from the outside world. But this program was a great way to stay connected with the community. Not only do you sharpen your understanding of the law, but you can spread this information and empower the next generation." And I thought that was, if we could have a statement of what we hoped this thing would accomplish, that would be it. And it's interesting because as I met with the deans, I tried to offer what's the win-win-win in this? What does everyone get out of it? And I quite honestly, I think we've spoken about for the students that the fact that they have um, law students showing an interest in their lives, making them feel important, taking the time to teach them, the chance to learn about their responsibilities and rights as citizens, and to learn how this government works. Selfishly, as a judge, I hope they'll learn about courts and the role of courts and understand that we are not some all-powerful being that can change everything in the world that they don't like. We have limited powers. We can only do certain things, and we're constricted by the law. We have to comply with the law. And so from a judge's perspective, we hope that's there. I have a wife and a daughter who are public school teachers. And from the teacher's perspective, I hope we give teachers a little bit of a break for a couple of days a week. Someone else comes in and handles the class, but also I think it's a learning experience for the teachers to learn from law students and their perspective. But I think the biggest beneficiaries are probably the law students. And when we were selling this to the deans, I wanted them to see, why is this good for law students? And I basically had 3 points that I tried to make with them. One was um, that they would be teaching complex constitutional concepts to high school students. And if they could learn to communicate in a way that those students understood, how better to train to talk to a jury? Because when you're trying a case, you're not trying it to lawyers and judges, you're trying it to lay people. And you've got to learn how to communicate with them. This is a great training ground for that. The second thing is that most of these classes are taught in collaboration. Several students will teach. So you learn how to work as a team. Today, litigation is so complex. Rarely does one lawyer try the case. It's a team, and you learn how to identify the strengths and weaknesses of each member of the team, and you work together. So this gives them that opportunity. And finally, I know when I was a law student, the opportunity to have worked with a judge would have been something really nice for me. I did not know any judges, had never met one, and didn't really know what they were like. But I strongly encourage these groups to invite judges, and I offer myself to come. And if they have trouble, I offer to recruit other judges to come so that they can be a part of this. But to give both the high school students and the law students a chance to interact with a judge and learn we're just people. We're not any different than you are. And to learn that about us, I think is good for the system. So those are all benefits that a law student, I think, gets from this program. And as I said, the deans all jumped on it immediately. They were all in from the beginning.
That's amazing. And with these interactions with the community and as you speak upon how these schools kind of come in interaction with, different levels of higher education and the students there. I was wondering kind of how this has had a personal impact on you, both as a judge and as an individual.
I think the danger for a judge is you have to fight against becoming cynical, because we most often see people in their worst place in life. On the criminal side, you have someone standing before you who's committed a crime, and you're about to mete out punishment for that person, pronounce a sentence that's going to impact not only their lives, but their families' lives. It's a tremendous burden. And you see people in litigation who are fighting over money or whatever, but often it involves their livelihoods, and what happens in that case will determine their success or failure in life. And so uh, that does not always bring out the best in people. And so you sometimes often are seeing people at their worst. And so I think it would be easy to become cynical and think that everyone has problems, everyone is breaking the law, everyone is doing this. And programs like this are important to remind us that most folks out there are just good people who want to do their jobs, want to live a good life, want to enjoy the benefits of being in a wonderful country like we're in here. And to do that in a high school setting, meet with high school students, it's like this law student said, it's the next generation, to see that it's still there, that that generation has the same dreams and aspirations that my generation had. And I see that in this program and the chance to meet with these students, the law students and the high school students. But let me tell you, it also carries over to my juries. When I have a jury trial, I meet with the jury after the trial and talk with them. And almost without exception, their first question is, did we do the right thing? Uh, Jurors uh, come to court because they're summoned to be jurors. We don't send out invitations. We send out summonses. You have to come, sir. And a lot of people are looking for a way to get out of it. But almost without exception, at the end of the trial, people will say to me, I'm so glad I didn't get out of it, that I did this. I understand so much better what this is all about and how it works. And I understand that I and my fellow jurors wanted to do the right thing. We wanted to make sure we did it right. We realized how important this was. And those kinds of experiences renew my faith every day in our system and in our people. And this is a part of that uh, whole mosaic of things that bring me to that point.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think that perspective is one that only a judge can express on and explain. And so I really appreciate your insights on that. And for the last question, for those who are interested in doing the kinds of work you do, in regards to civic education and beyond, I would love to know what it takes to prepare, any expert tricks that you would want to share for anyone who's aspiring to get involved in the kind of work that you do.
That's the great thing about this program. It does not require a large sum of money. It mainly requires people who are interested and want to invest in it, invest their time in it. And so one of the things I've asked these schools to do that are working on this is to help develop templates that could be taken to other places and used in other places to accomplish these same things. And so that is out there, and I'm happy for anyone to reach out to us and ask, and we would be happy to share. There are also other programs. I mentioned the Indiana program, but there's also a program called the Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Project that is run in 19 law schools across the country. That is a similar program teaching civics. And so there are programs out there that you can use as a model for doing this. Interestingly, the Athens program, the University of Georgia program, is leaning more toward middle school, doing this in middle school. I had encouraged high school, but when they did the programs, I said, you look at your communities and see what you need. And they're looking at possibly some middle school programs. So it's not necessarily just for high schools, it's also can be for middle schools. And And as I said, there are programs across the country that do this, and our programs would the professors who lead them are wonderful people and are excited about what they're doing, and they are more than happy to talk to anyone who has an interest in being a part of such a program. It's not a network. It's not something you join. It's sort of each is a freestanding, independent organization. But the main thing is being able to have some assistance in helping you understand how to get into the school. How do you find the teacher that would want you to do this, and doing that outreach to find the fertile ground to plant the program. And so those are things that are critical to making it succeed.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and experiences. I'm sure everyone who's tuning in on this interview is as inspired, and hopefully, they are more interested in getting involved in such civic education work. And as a member of the Berkeley Judicial Institute, I want to thank you, Judge Story, again so much for the amazing insights. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you.